Yesterday we kind of talked about the new refrigerant, the 410A and the 454. I'm going to touch on it again today. You handle the R454 the same way you would handle the 410 in a scenario where you have a leak. You recover everything, repair your leak, and then charge clean 410. All right, you can't pump it down and top it off. All right, you could do that with the R32, but not with the R454. Okay, a lot of the units have, well, with the central air unit, we have our leak detector sensor that's going to be located in the air handler. All right, the ductless units do have that as well. So how it's going to work, the condensers, if it ever senses that refrigerant, a leak, it's going to shut your condenser off. It's going to ramp up the fan to ventilate. And then once it satisfies that thermistor, it'll then shut off and then give you that error code that, I'm off because there is a leak. All right. On that air handler, it'll be a red light. And on these ductless units, you'll be in an actual error code. Okay. We kind of talked about the vacuum pump already. Do I need to go over it some more? Okay.
What refrigerant do you guys use? 32 or 454?
The majority is 454, and we only have one unit, the Elite 17, that's cooling only, that has R32. But everything here is 454. All right. I believe, from what I've read, if you use sniffers, I'm the old school version. I like to do nitrogen and soap bubbles. That's my favorite way of doing it. But if you like to use that electronic sniffer, I believe you have to buy a separate sniffer because it doesn't read 410 and 54 is two different sniffers. It doesn't read the leak if you have a 410A1. So I read that in an article somewhere, so I don't know how much of that is true. But the nitrogen and soap bubbles was always my favorite method. Dye sticks, you might have some manufacturers that don't want you to use dye sticks. That's another form of leak detection. And all it is just mixing with the oil, and then you shine your black light to it, and wherever it shines a fluorescent yellow, that's where your leak is. That's another good form. Much more accurate, but understand the reason why manufacturers don't like that, because there are some guys out there that would add the capsule, because they have the capsules that are specific to a tonnage, that's the size, right? Some guys will go out there and put 2 capsules in there, and you don't need to overdo it like that. Just use 1 capsule to the size of the system, let it circulate for a couple of days, and then go back and leak search. You'll find it. But there's some guys that would put 2 capsules in there, and that's where it affects the oil and therefore affecting the compressor. Same thing with the leak seal. I don't know if you ever used leak seal in a refrigeration system. Have you used it before? That one, they really don't want you to use, because again, you'll have guys that'll put more than 1 capsule in there, and that will gum up the oil in the compressor, and boom, we're going to lose our compressor. And it's super hard to determine how big the leak is. That sealant does work, but it has to be a really small leak, like a pinhole. How are you going to determine that? You don't. And this is why guys just going, oh, just put another one in there, and boom, that's just where you lose your compressor. All right? So be mindful of that. If you're going to use stuff like that, the dye stick will probably be the only thing that they'll be okay with. Just use just the 1 capsule to the size of the unit. All right. If you don't want to use the sniffer, and if you can't find it with your nitrogen and soap bubbles. All right. Nitrogen and soap bubbles worked for me. I've always pumped it down, closed off my valves, and then I added nitrogen into the line set that covered the evaporator. Right. I always put it to 300, 350, whatever I had in my truck. Right. You see the pressure is dropping. Okay. There's a good chance my leak is going to be in that evaporator coil, right? So then I go to the evaporator and I look for it. Sometimes you can hear it at that pressure. If the coil is good, there's going to be something in my line set. You're able to isolate the system and go from there. All right? Don't ever panic. Don't ever panic. There's always a way to do it. All right? And then, of course, put some water in the pan, make sure it's draining out properly, simple little things on the startup. As far as remote control, you have your turbo, which is like powerful mode. It's going to go into full speed, and it'll run that way for 15 minutes, or if it reaches 62 degrees in cooling. All right, same thing with heat. It's short term. It's just to get that burst of heat or burst of hot air, whichever one. I feel is a nice little feature. I feel if they would activate I feel and put the remote next to them, like they're sitting on a sofa watching TV, and they click on I feel, instead of reading the temperature at the wall mount, it'll read it at the remote. Okay, it'll read it at the remote and for like an hour, and put it right there next to them. That's not permanent. That's timed. All right, so that we do have. I think Bosch has that too, right? Luke, did you see that before?
No, not the iFeel. Maybe in the thermostat though.
Oh, the wall mount thermostat?
I haven't done the Bosch and the wall units, if that's what.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah, just the like the air handlers in the furnace.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So there's your I feel. Oh, my bad. It's 2 hours, not 1 hour. You activate it, it'll run for 2 hours like that. I like that feature. It's a nice little feature. That generator mode, it's gone. The self-cleaning feature. This is another pretty good feature that's on the Breeze In model, and it does a self-cleaning, and basically what it does, it's going to turn on the system and freeze up the indoor coil. It's going to get like frost on it. Then it's going to warm it up to defrost it, and then as it's defrosting, that water is going to pull off any dust or lint or whatever off the coil and into the pan and drain it outside. So it does have a self-cleaning feature to it. And the condenser, it's going to turn the fan on in reverse and blow the air in the opposite direction to blow out any debris in between the fins outside. I still recommend hitting it with a hose, but you don't, hey, every 2 or 3 months, you can do your own self-cleaning. That's up to you, if you want to tell them that. Test run, electric leak test. I mean, we talked about that with the testing the ground. When you turn it on, let it run for a good 10, 15 minutes before you start recording your temperatures. Let it run. I can't really tell you. I like to get, and this is something that I talk with engineering about, certain little things that some people do look for. I can't really tell you what the temperature difference is from the return to the supply. You know how there's a temperature difference? I believe the average is 15 degrees. 13 to 15 degrees, that's like the average. So if you after you let it run for 10, 15 minutes and you check your temperature coming into the top and what's coming out to the bottom, if you're between that 13 and 15 degrees, then you're good. As far as it's going to cool the space, right? Because your gauge is, you really can't test superheat or subcooling because your metering device is outside. All right, if it was in reverse, then you can check superheat, then you can check subcooling, but you can't do that with the ductless product. So what other contractors do is they check the temperature difference across the coil, and usually the average is 13 to 15. All right, so if you fall within that range, you're good. All right, and that's putting it on powerful mode, not just turning it on. Put it on powerful mode.